What did we learn in that blowout victory about the
Okay,
Niners?
why don't we take turns? At the very bottom, or the basis, we learned they can beat a very bad team that just fired its coach. We learned that.
Yes.
What's something that you learned?
It's the second team they've beaten that's fired their coach this year. Another thing is, Purdy had been struggling, and it was kind of hard. Like in Buffalo, he looked pretty bad, and he struggled against Seattle. But it was important to see him play like that again. That was the best of Brock, and I think what happened was the Bears, who fired their coach, who was a defensive guy, had no idea what they were doing defensively, and they called a lot of zone coverage, which it's good to remember. Brock Purdy absolutely dices up zone
Yeah,
coverage. It's why everyone plays man against the 49ers. Everyone, of course, except the Bears.
right. Having said that, Purdy looked really good,
Mm-hmm.
and it was nice to see him look really good. It doesn't mean he'll look good going forward. That's what these games are about. He's trying to establish himself as the absolute quarterback for years to come, and he made a step in that direction. I would also say we saw Kyle Shanahan at his best, meaning, and this is something you've talked about before this show, he was always going through Christian McCaffrey and, in fact, leaning on him and not showing any creativity or much because he had Christian. Now he doesn't have Christian, and he has to look what his other options are and sort of move the mental furniture in his brain around. And he did. He called on offense an extremely creative game, and it reminds you, yeah, this coach can do it.
Yeah, and there's another thing he did. It's like earlier in the season without Christian, the offense was so different, and people were talking about, well, there's not that much separation. There's not that much yards after the catch. Purdy's holding the ball a long time. He's throwing the ball really far down the field. I feel like him throwing the ball down the field or Kyle calling downfield throws explained why the yak was down, because it's harder to get yards after the catch on throws down the field because everyone's close to you, and there's more separation when there's less separation when you're down the field. Like if you want to get a lot of yards after the catch and separation, throw screens, and they haven't been doing that very much this year. If you throw the ball to a guy behind the line of scrimmage, the defender is 10 yards away. So it was nice to see Kyle Shanahan finally get Brock Purdy easy throws behind the line of scrimmage and play action. Those are the two ways a coach can really make a quarterback's life easy.
And get him to George Kittle. He was a weapon always available. And we see Kansas City do it with their tight end. You see you see Detroit do it with their tight end. Finally, it's like finally Kyle got the memo. And you want to say, what were you thinking? But we're praising now.
Mm-hmm.
He did a very nice job, and he did things that elite teams do with his
Yeah.
elite player.
Yeah, it was nice to see George Kittle get featured and reward Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy in the first. He was unstoppable in the first half. And Juwan Jennings was consistent the whole game. It's nice to see that despite the injuries to Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams, that the Niners can really still have a dominant offensive performance because they still have a lot of talent there between Kittle and Jennings, Purdy and Garendo. The offensive line did a pretty good job. I mean, they weren't hoiting for talent.
No, and they weren't hurting for weapons. And again, I would remind people, if you say, oh, they're 6-7, they've had a lot of injuries, don't go there. They still have talent, and there's a lot of games that they should have won, and there are games coming up that they can win, including Thursday.
There's this website called Pro Football Focus that attempts to grade each team and each player, and they do a pretty good job. It's not an exact science, but they have the Niners ranked as the 7th highest graded team in the league this year, which shows that even though they've had bad luck and a lot of injuries, they're still one of the more talented teams in the league. And that's why the 6-7 record's disappointing, but it's also why Sunday happened. Not just because the Bears are truly awful, but because the Niners still do have a lot of talent. And when it's used correctly and they have, I don't know, the word of the week is desperation, they're pretty good.
It's interesting what the word of the week is: desperation, motivation, seriousness,
Yeah.
facing a crisis,
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, this team understandably maybe didn't necessarily hit the panic button or go to code blue early in the season because they're a veteran team. They've been through this before. They've had slow starts. But last week at 5-7 after back-to-back blowout losses, it was time. And it's good to see the Niners like actually the other phrase of the year, lock in. They locked in last week, and let's see if they can
That's
keep it
a
going.
that's a Debo. We're going to get to
It's a
him later.
Deboism.
It's a Debo wisdom, football wisdom from Debo.